Half-Life 1 is a wacky little game about some wacky little scientists in a wacky underground lab made about 25 years ago by a wacky guy named Gabe Newell. The setting I thought was brilliant. A scientist in an underground lab that creates a portal to an alien world that comes to attack ours with the government trying to kill everyone to keep the whole thing quiet. The developers use the setting as an excuse to constantly throw fresh situations at the player without it feeling contrived. First you're in the labs, then you're in the tunnels, then you're fighting a big fucking shark monster that I could barely deal with because I don't know, it just freaked me out. None of which feels out of place because you're in a weird scientific facility, so any kind of level the developers might want to design can be explained away by, oh, it does some weird science thing that you're too stupid to understand. And the player can just accept this because it works within the setting. Imagine half of these levels with a different setting. How could you have so many giant spinning platforms to traverse in like Call of Duty Favela without breaking immersion? You couldn't. Adding aliens gives the developers an excuse to create any kind of enemy that they might want to. Having an enemy that dangles its tongue down from the ceiling and sucks you up into it, again, would be incredibly difficult to add to Call of Duty. All that is to say, the setting gives the developers an incredibly high level of freedom, which they absolutely made use of throughout the entire game. The developers clearly had a good idea of what goes through a player's mind. When you have a crowbar in your hand, in a video game, you're gonna smash things with it. As a result, they put a lot of effort into making things likely for the player to do, fun for the player to do. It would have been easy for them to use the technological constraints of the time as an excuse not to bother, but they didn't. This understanding of the player's mind is present throughout the entire game. Look how they put this meat blatantly in the way so your monkey brain is tempted to bop it one. The game seems to have been designed to feel like one continual journey from start to finish. Aside from being knocked out once, there's really no cutscenes or obnoxious loading screens that just completely take you out of the game. The closest you come is sometimes when you go to walk into a new area, it will stop you for a moment while it loads in. I was surprised that the 25th anniversary update wouldn't have removed these because it would finally accomplish that feeling of a seamless journey from start to finish. It's also hard to overstate the value of the NPCs in this game. The lonely feeling of advancing through this facility being broken by the wacky scientist and guard encounters was a great way of rewarding the players for continuing forward. There's something so brilliant about all the NPCs having the same voices and only a few different models. It's like they're a shared consciousness. You get to know one, and then he gets killed, but then you meet him again later on, and you feel like you're reuniting with an old friend or something. The design philosophy for this game was communication. The player communicates with the game, and ideally, the game responds. It's funny how a game about communication having a voiceless protagonist somehow feels like the correct choice. Gordon is a vehicle for the player to communicate. Being mute, he can never say something that makes the player go, "Why the fuck did he say that?" In this way, the only communicating Gordon can do is entirely through the actions of the player.
You have to have this sense of the game acknowledging and responding to the choices and actions and progressions that you've made. Otherwise, it loses any sort of impact.
Survival's rule of threes says most people can go about 3 minutes without air. Gordon, however, will just dunk his head underwater and just immediately start drowning. Listen to this shit. Maybe that's why he doesn't speak. He lacks the lung capacity. Anyone who can go to a job interview and not answer a single question or say a single word but still get hired must be quite impressive. And I think this game in its day must have been quite impressive too. It's not perfect. Your goals often feel nebulous, enemies barely react to getting shot, feedback on whether you're actually damaging bosses can be confusing, ladders suck ass, and the graphics are starting to look a little bit old, but it's still a cool little piece of gaming history, and it is actually quite fun too.